Great. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning, participants of this webinar. Thank you to our panelists who are all present and ready to start us off on this conversation on unlocking market value in the circular economy specific to plastic as an asset, not necessarily as has been seen as a liability, and though it has been a bane in terms of the ecosystem and in the environment. We have a panel full of stakeholders who are keen on making it an asset and changing the way we think about it. And that's why we're here for this webinar and this conversation. As we continue, we will be having people join us. Thank you to those who have already joined us and on time. My name is Masai. I'll be the moderator for this conversation that has been convened, co-convened by the Kenya Climate Ventures and KIFFWA. And this is, I'd say I'm a friend of KCV and KIFFWA, going by the virtue of the conversations we have held similar over the last several months. And so it's good to be here, and it's good to also be the moderator for this conversation. I'd like to say karibu sana to our keynote speaker, Dr. Ayub Macharia Daruga, Director Environmental Enforcement at NEMA. Thank you to Rajesh Kent, Managing Director, Alternative Energy Systems Limited, ISIL, and Mary Ngechu, Founder, Takataka ni Mali Foundation, and Ikrit Kent, the CEO of T3 EPZ Limited, and Joyce Gashugi, the CEO Packaging Producer Responsibility Organization, that is PACPRO, and James Odongo, the CEO of Kenya Extended Producer Responsibility Organization, KEPRO. We will be hearing from all of them and getting an opportunity to be properly and formally introduced. Just in case I've misrepresented, maybe someone before the last, since the last conversation we had, has assumed doctor or professor. So you will represent yourselves more accurately, but it's good to have you all with us. And I'll give an opportunity to the panelists to just say a quick hi and then hand it over to our keynote speaker to get the keynote address that sets the context for this conversation going. So, Daktari, we can start with you with a quick introduction and then over to the rest of the panel just to warm up the room of this webinar conversation. So, karibu Daktari, kuwasalimu watu. Since you will be starting with the keynote address. Rajesh, I've seen you online, so you can start us off with a quick good morning and karibu.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Raj Kent from Alternative Energy Systems Limited, and we are in the field of chemical recycling.
Asante. Over to you, Mary.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Mary Ngechu. I'm the founding patron for Takataka ni Mali. And Takataka ni Mali is a CSR project for my group of company called Line Plus Group. I'm happy to be here and we'll give more details of what we're doing. Thank you.
And Mary, for the benefit of those who Swahili is not their first language, you could probably tell us just a translation of Takataka ni Mali. People are joining us from different parts of the world, I'd imagine. So this is your moment.
So thank you. Takataka ni Mali is a Swahili word that says waste is wealth. And this conversation, we are talking about how can we convert plastic into a resource. And that is what we push, to see that we can convert different components of waste from being waste into being a resource and also being money to the people who are doing the work. Thank you.
Asante for that. Ikrit, COO, T3, EPZ, all sounds very important. You can break it down for us as you introduce yourself and say good morning to the rest.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Ikrit. I am the Chief Operations Officer at T3, where we're recycling PET bottles and jars into new bottles. So we're based in Kenya and we're looking to close the loop entirely on plastic packaging. So it's a pleasure to be a part of this panel and I'm very excited to join this discussion this morning. Thank you.
Asante sana, and we love your background and it speaks and emphasizes the message. Joyce Gashugi, it's your opportunity to say good morning.
Thank you, Mark. Good morning, everyone. I am Joyce Kashugi Waweru. I am the Chief Executive Officer at the Packaging Producer Responsibility Organization, PACPRO. We are Kenya's first producer responsibility organization. Our mandate is to ensure that our members' packaging material post-consumer is treated through one form of the other. And our key drive is to promote circularity while bringing inclusivity in the value chain.
Asante sana. James?
Okay, thank you, Mark. Good morning, everyone. My name is James Odongo. I work for the Kenya Extended Producer Responsibility Organization as a CEO. Similar to PACPRO, we are a producer responsibility organization focusing on the packaging for non-hazardous sector. So supporting producers within the Kenyan ecosystem to not only comply with the regulatory provisions, but also the environmental obligations as far as matter sustainability is concerned. So thank you very much, and really also glad to have been considered by KCV to join this conversation.
Thank you, James. And now to Dr. Ayub Macharia. I believe he's now ready to start us off. And with the theme that is very clear to us all, we'd like to draw attention to what we really want as an objective at the end of this conversation. Being plastic as an asset, unlocking market value in the circular economy, we'd like to be able, at the end of this conversation, to have reframed the plastic waste as an economic asset and highlight the economic potential of plastic waste, something that the experts on the panel know too well. And so to Dr. Ayub Macharia, just to set us off with the keynote and the contextual conversation, over to you. Just hang tight. We are just reaching out to Dr. Ayub. Earlier, we did do a quick call and he was ready and set with his presentation. So our team member here, Lucy, has just reached out to him. And thank you to Pascal Okwara, Mbina Mutiso, Navnik Kaur, Cliff Monene, Awur Dorothy, who joined this conversation, Dennis Okwara, Job Kasambio, Jay Patel, Paris Maura, Purity Awino, all who have joined in, Nick Maison, Santeni Sana, and we acknowledge your presence, Jimmy Odhiambo. And feel free as you follow the conversation, even this particular keynote address by Dr. Ayub Macharia, to throw in your question. They will be attentive and be following and monitoring the chat section. We have a team that's doing that as well. Just a reminder, if you've just joined, after I did say this, we are live on the Kenya Climate Ventures YouTube channel. The link has been put or is going to be put on the chat section, and you'll be able to share that with your colleagues, friends, and on your platform. So I believe Dr. Ayub Macharia is ready to start us off with the keynote address, and karibu.
Thank you. Thank you, Mark. Good morning, everybody. All protocols observed. I'm very excited to have been invited to join this meeting, representing my Director General. My name is Ayub Macharia. I'm going to do a presentation. If I could be enabled to share, I would really appreciate. And my presentation is about where we are as a country in terms of managing plastic waste. As you are aware that this year's World Environment Day was about plastic pollution. And so we have had a lot of activities dealing with plastic pollution. And so my presentation will be to to enable us get into a discussion about whether how are we performing in terms of plastic waste management in Kenya. To be short. Now, let me start with some facts about plastics. Incidentally, we don't have very comprehensive statistics about plastics globally and in Kenya, but the figures are huge. As you can see, there are predictions that well, in 1850, we were only 2 million metric tons and 381 million tons in 2015, global figures. Another one, global figure is 7.8 billion metric tons of plastics by 2015. Again, some studies done in Nairobi, and these are documented in our sustainable waste management policy. Waste composition in Nairobi is 60% organic, 30% recyclable, of which majority is plastics and 10% others. And then another study indicating that plastic constitutes 9% of waste in Nairobi. And, you know, when, I don't know whether I'm supposed to admit people into the room. I'm seeing a lot of people requesting to enter.
Don't worry about that. You just focus on the presentation because we have a team that's admitting people. So there's other administrators on this. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. Now, so Nairobi, there are two conflicting figures on Nairobi. Actually, the last one I got it this morning from ChatGPT, and they are saying that Nairobi alone produces about 500 metric tons of plastic waste daily, and where less than 10% is recycled. And then there is a second last. Plastic constitute 9%. If we go by 9%, then it means there are 270 metric tons of plastic daily. But of course, 270 is quite huge. Those are like 27 10-ton trucks of waste daily, of plastic waste generated daily in Nairobi, and it's a lot. So we are dealing with a real issue. And of course, when you visit our dam sites, there is a lot of that plastic. So we ask ourselves, therefore, why are plastic bags so favorite to Kenyans? There are several reasons. One of them being that they are cost-effective, easy to use, and convenient to store. They are available in bulk purchases at very low cost as compared to alternative bags such as reusable cloth bags. They're also quicker to open, pack, and double wrap than other bags. And they are light and require less storage space than other bags. And so when you look at these advantages that plastics have, these are the reasons why there has been sustained demand for plastics. Even when we are within the period of the ban on plastic bags, you find that they are still sold quietly in our markets because of those reasons. But we appreciate that Kenya has taken several steps to manage plastic pollution, and we have several laws and policies in place. Starting with the Environmental Management and Coordination Act gives us the standards, and then Sustainable Waste Management Policy. It's the one that has given us some data on plastics and also how to manage it in form of a storyline. And then there is enforcement bit of the policy, that is the Sustainable Waste Management Act 2022, which provides ways to manage waste, as I will explain later. There is also the Extended Producer Responsibility Regulations of 2024, the Waste Management Regulations 2024, which is key in terms of after you collect the plastics, what do you do with them? So this is the law that has the standards and has the methods on how to manage our plastics after we collect them. And then finally, also in 2024, we have the plastic packaging regulations, which does a lot. It's an extension of the ban of 2017, which explains further how we are going to behave ourselves when we still have this demand that I projected earlier. The demand for plastics is there. We don't have alternatives, and we already have a ban. So what do we do when the ban is there and the demand is still there? How do we transition towards a zero plastic economy? So there are several negative impacts of plastics, and that is why this year's World Environment Day is about plastics. Plastics reduce environmental aesthetics. They also release toxic fumes when burned. If they are ingested by animals, they kill the animals, and especially livestock, and that is a loss to farmers. It also contributes to flooding in urban areas because they clog the drainage systems. They also act as breeding grounds for harmful organisms because they do not allow water to go away, and so they are breeding grounds for mosquitoes and other disease-causing organisms. And they take centuries to decompose, so they can be here with us for a very long time. So these are some of the negative impacts of plastics, and that is why they are a key concern globally. We can map our plastic journey in Kenya through several, like 2 decades of addressing the plastic menace, starting from 2007, when the government imposed that 120% excise duty for plastic shopping bags. And then come 2010, around that way, 2010, there was a ban on bags that are less than 30 microns. And so you can see we are still tightening. 2007, we tightened a bit. Then in 2010, we tightened further. There is a ban. And then we have a total ban of carrier bags, plastic bags in 2017. And that is Gazette Notice 2356. And then the government saw that everything was good, and they wanted to ban even PET bottles. But the private sector came forward and said, don't ban, it is a waste management issue. We will help you to manage waste. And then we entered into what we call a framework of cooperation on PET. That was done in 2018, and then a company called Petco was born to implement that waste management, and the big companies that sell their products using PET were the ones who established the company. And then in 2020, also between 2018 and 2020, there was a hive of activity because there was a ban also for bread packing bags. And so the bread packing people came together and established a company called KEFFWA. So you can see companies were being established to deal with the menace. And then we still, the private sector, there was a gap because the companies, these were voluntary schemes. And so the companies claimed that there were only about 10 companies, big companies, but the companies that were using plastics, PET, were so many. And so the two companies, KEFFWA, Petco, through Kenya Association of Manufacturers, and KEPSA, came to the ministry and requested us that we make it mandatory for everybody to manage plastics that they introduce into the market. And that gave way to the publishing of the sustainable waste management policy in 2021. And then 2022, the Sustainable Waste Management Act was launched. And then 2024, we have the extended producer responsibility. We are going to see how these laws are helping to manage plastic waste in Kenya. Let me start with the Plastic Packaging Regulations 2024. This one has several prohibitions. As I said, it's an extension of the ban of 2017. And the prohibition under Section 6 is that a person shall not manufacture, import, export, possess, use, or offer for sale a flat bag or plastic bag by NEMA. So remember, this is coming at a time when we have a total ban. But we realize that primary packaging, like for sausages, reasons to continue packing those things using plastics. And for that reason, without setting aside the ban, we are now implementing what we call a phased elimination of plastics, where when we get alternatives, that plastic will be removed from the market. And that is why bullet 2 is important to demonstrate the phased approach. The authority may authorize the manufacture, import, export, and use of plastic packaging materials for industrial packaging and non-industrial packaging of the items specified in the first schedule. And the first schedule is this one that I have projected. So we only allow plastic packaging for and use of like fumes for materials used in the construction sector, for agricultural sector, for manufacture of tents, then materials used in mechanical and machine parts, materials used for packaging of household wares and packaging, vegetable and food packing bags, diaper and sanitary disposal bags, and any other material that may be determined by the authority from time to time. But if you are authorized to use plastic bags, then that conditions are NEMA must know. You must do your declarations to NEMA, and then you are issued with an annual license. Then you must also demonstrate that you will collect those bags wherever they are. That is therefore implementing an EPR plan. And then annually, you submit a report to NEMA. And this will help us to address the problem that I had my first slide when I showed you. I demonstrated that I don't have data. Even ChatGPT does not have data on plastics in Kenya. And we have a criteria, therefore. As I said, we are doing a phase out, a phase out approach in plastics that will stay, that we are seeing in the market now. We consider during approval the degree of recyclability of the plastic packaging material, whether the product is required for product preservation or public health concerns. Another product may also qualify if it is required as a security measure, or if it is required for water and dust proofing, if it is required to maintain product integrity while on transit, or if it does not constitute overpackaging, or if there is other reasonably feasible non-plastic alternative packaging material. So if that exists, then it cannot be approved. All is a packaging material in accordance with any international rules and standards applicable in Kenya. All is a plastic packaging material for export is in accordance with the relevant standards and requirements of the country where the good is being exported to, because we also produce for export, or is it used in conformity with an industry standards for which there is no viable alternative? So these are the conditions that we consider during this phase out period of the plastic bags. So this is the criteria that guides us. So whenever we see plastic bags in Kenya, they are continuing to stay because of especially number G. There is no reasonably feasible non-plastic alternative packaging material. And for you to be allowed, of course, we have to process more fee to be paid, depending on the number of bags that you are going to use, as shown on the screen. Now, as I said, we have had the law changed, and the responsibility for all synthetic products introduced into the market, it is the responsibility of the producer, the person who is placing those items on the market. And it is not a new thing. We have had these schemes since 2018. As I explained, when we didn't have a law, they were voluntary. And they achieved tremendous success, like Petico, mopped over 30,000 tons of PET since 2018. And then KEPRO, 9,000 tons of LDP, worth 85 million in 32 counties. But we had a challenge. Every voluntary scheme, some people want to hide. Waste management is a cost. So we had a lot of joyriders, and that is the reason why the Sustainable Waste Management Act of 2022, Section 13, established the mandatory EPR for all producers. And so all producers are to demonstrate compliance with Section 13 of the Act. How you do that is through mapping your whole waste management system from waste generator, waste service provider, material recovery facility, recycler, disposal and incineration or disposal in a landfill. So you find that EPR, there is a fee that is supposed to be paid not to NEMA, but the industry, the producers should organize themselves and they contribute amongst themselves money for waste management. And this money will also be used for public awareness, collection, transportation, recycling, composting, treatment, and disposal of waste. Also used for research and development, to operate take-back schemes, to do life cycle assessment, to do eco-designs, to do product traceability, monitoring and reporting, developing markets for secondary raw materials, and taking measures to reduce impacts of their products on the health and environment, and also embracing appropriate technology. So this is how the EPR scheme should look like as prescribed in the the sustainable waste EPR regulations of 2024. And so the producers are supposed to either do that individually or collectively. If you do individually, then you have to register with NEMA. Actually, since the producer is not a waste service provider, we expect that they will do that through a waste service provider, or through a collective schemes. You establish what we call a producer responsibility organization, in which every producer is a member, is a shareholder. And then whichever route you take, what NEMA requires is an EPR plan, which shows where you'll be collecting your waste from, because all space occupied by waste is supposed to be licensed by NEMA. So we need you to tell us your collection points, when you are doing your collection, so that we can follow up to make sure that our collection points do not turn into dump sites, how you are compensating the waste pickers, how you are doing public awareness, how you are working with counties, how you are working with waste service transporters, recyclers, disposal facilities, including what data you have, what amounts or what volumes of waste you have managed to move to the recycler, to the incinerator, and to the landfill. So this is the EPR implementation model that we have proposed in the law. And if anyone is an importer, of course, producers are both they are producers locally, that is, they are manufacturers locally, or they are even importers. So So all of them, whether or a manufacturer, they're supposed to register with NEMA. So if you are all plastics, they are subject to payment of, I think, 150. These figures have been contested in court, and we are expecting a ruling soon this month to tell us whether we continue with the Kenya shillings 150. And then for that reason, EPR law is a subject of court litigation, but the letter of that law says that they are supposed to pay 150 per item at the port of entry for post-EPR waste management. But the local producers are not paying that. Then they will just proceed and do the scheme registration, annual operating license, we will give them, and then annual work plan and budget, they supply to NEMA. They give us progress report every quarter. They do an audit report by an independent auditor approved by NEMA, and also give NEMA a certified copy of their financial statement, so that we are sure that the money is not used to pay salaries only, it is used for waste management, and also making sure that everybody pays the right amount of money. So that is how the process of EPR compliance is formulated. And so all producers, therefore, anybody who is placing a plastic on the market should have registered with NEMA, should have a take-back scheme. That is, you should take back your products from the consumer. They should have an individual or a collective extended producer responsibility scheme. Then they should provide the authority with reports on the status of implementation of their EPR obligations, and they should design products and packaging materials that minimize waste, facilitate reuse, recycling, recovery, and use of secondary raw materials where possible, and are environmentally friendly at the end of life. Then finance, they should demonstrate that they have finances to manage their waste and that they have systems in place to manage their waste, organizational and physical uh, arrangement. Then they should create awareness to the consumer on how to manage that waste. After I finish using my toothpaste, where do I take that packaging? And then they should also carry out product life cycle assessment in relation to their products for enhancing environmental sustainability. So life cycle assessment enables the producer to understand their product, so that if it has any toxic additives, then they look for alternatives. How can they make their products non-toxic? And then, of course, finally, put in place circular economy initiatives and any other measures to reduce the impact of their product on health and the environment. So that is for those who are putting any plastic that you see in Kenya, those are the obligations that are there, that have been put in place. I've already explained that you you do this individually or collectively. But if you are coming together collectively, you don't just team up with your friend. We will not. We don't expect a person with an EPR that is dealing with vehicles at the same time they are dealing with packaging, for example. They are not similar products. Okay, so EPROs are established based on similarities. Similarity of products, similarity of uses, similarity of resultant waste. And so those are the determinants of the producers coming together. I talked about 150. It is for a few selected items, and it is only for finished products. And this 150 is supposed to deal with waste at post recycling level. If there is recycling, if there is any management of waste processing of waste up to recycling, a recycler has residual waste. Where will that residual waste go? It will go to the government, to the counties, to our dam sites, or what we call landfills. And so how will it be managed there? Or will we allow it to remain the way it is now, and we are complaining we don't have money? So that is why we proposed this 150, so that we can improve our landfills to become better, to receive these problematic residual waste. So this is, in actual fact, the producer would have taken care of this. We could have told them, make sure you process your waste until it is zero waste. But it may not be possible. It may be very expensive for the producers. In this case, if the government gets the 150, then we can help the producers to manage those very problematic fractions. So our EPR therefore lands like this. The country already has a waste color code, and every person who generates waste in Kenya shall only dispose that waste to licensed waste service providers or designated collection points. And according to the National Waste Color Code, you put organic waste separate, and then general waste separate, and then recyclables separate. Now, I've already read to you, told you about EPR. EPR is for synthetics. Synthetics are in general waste or recyclables. So you can see waste management in Kenya, therefore, the responsibility is divided into two. Organic waste is the responsibility of the county government. Then synthetics becomes the responsibility of the producers. And they are supposed to, that waste should go to, from the generator, it should go to material recovery facility, to the recycler, the incinerator, to the landfill. And at all these levels, there should be proof of engagement of value chain actors, such as waste pickers, aggregators, and material recovery facilities. So that is where the money is going. The producer has to cater for all that, and they need to do that when they come together as a producer responsibility organization. Okay, now for organic waste, I don't need to explain because it's not the subject of today's discussion. Now, so now that the law is in place, you know the weakest point in our laws is enforcement, and we are now at enforcement phase. So we appreciate EPR regulations were enacted in November 2024, but there is that court challenge that I have talked about, which we expect it will be through with the court process soon. If this process went on in an ideal way, like other laws that are not contentious, implementation would have commenced with compliance. That is where everybody registered with NEMA, they form PROs, and then they put in place all mechanisms to manage waste. However, this did not happen in Kenya because EPR law delayed. And so we had to start with enforcement first before compliance. So we enforce it through Section 13, Section 30, and Section 32 of the Sustainable Waste Management Act, where Section 13.1 says that every producer shall bear extended producer responsibility obligations to reduce pollution and environmental impacts of products introduced into the Kenyan market and waste arising therefrom. So everybody who is bringing plastics into the country, the law says that you should label, you should have your label in that plastic. And as we go to the environment and we find it there, then Section 13.1 applies, and Section 13.2, where we ask you about whether you have an extended producer responsibility scheme, compliance scheme. If we will take further the case, if we find your product in the environment, we accuse you of failing to manage waste in accordance with the law. And we therefore request or direct that you clean up and restore the site where that waste was placed wrongly to its natural state. And we have done that severally. We have done it 4 times in Nairobi rivers, where we asked companies to clean up the river because we found their products there. So normally we issue the person with a site restoration order if the person fails to clean up the site. And of course, we are lucky because whenever we ask for the companies to clean, they have cleaned up. The only challenge we have is that when they clean, we have so far not seen a take-back scheme. You know, cleanup is not sustainable. We are looking for a take-back scheme to show that that is the only proof that we have that we will not have that pollution there tomorrow. So we have that challenge. So that is what is happening. Please allow me to do 2 more slides. And this is on the negotiations that is going on plastics. As you are aware that plastics is a global concern, and this was noted in 2021 when we had the UNEA 5, UNEA 5, and we got resolution 14. Resolution 14 asked the UNEP Director General, Executive Director, to constitute an intergovernmental negotiating committee to come up with the United Nations Treaty on Plastics Pollution. And so far, we have held 5 meetings, and we have come up with areas that we are considering. We are almost agreeing. We hope we shall agree this coming August. There is a meeting in Geneva to agree on these areas below. Plastic products. What do we do with plastic products? Because products are the ones that cause pollution. And of course, we cannot remove all plastics products from the market. And so there will be exemptions. What shall we exempt from being removed from the market? And then what kind of designs do we want? Plastic products designs. You know, we are not saying plastic is bad. What we are condemning is plastic pollution. Okay? So we are not saying zero plastic. It is zero plastic pollution. So therefore, for you to get zero plastic pollution, it's about product design. It's about supply and sustainable production. It's about releases and leakages to the environment. How do we deal with the releases and leakages? And then plastic waste management and existing plastic pollution is a major concern for Africa because our dump sites are full of plastics. And these plastics, we don't know what they are made of. They are poisons. And so those 2 bullets are very important for Africa. We would like to have a system in place to manage the plastic pollution that is already existing. The transition is where we have talked about our waste pickers. They need also to be integrated in the new plan. We have an issue with finances. We cannot implement all what I have read if we don't have money. So the treaty needs its own financial mechanism. And then the others are enablers, such as capacity building, technical assistance, technology transfer, international cooperation, implementation and compliance, national plans reporting, effectiveness, evaluation. Those are enablers. But the gist of the matter is what is on my left, including just transition. So why is Kenya interested in this global treaty? because of we have had challenges with illegal entry of plastics from our porous borders, which increases the cost of waste management and even enforcement. We chase people. And when we look at these plastics, where they are coming from, they are not manufactured locally. They are coming from through our porous borders. As I said, the demand for plastic is very high. Then we also have our ocean, our Lake Victoria, our other water bodies, including Lake Turkana. These are international water bodies. What if plastics, we find plastics there, which come from Ethiopia, which come from India, Tanzania, our neighbors, or even countries far away, including South Africa, if they come through the Indian Ocean because of waves, drifted by waves. So we are going to use our resources. So we need to have a mechanism in place to manage that kind of burden. Then loss of jobs and revenue due to migration of industries to low ambition countries. So, you know, when we banned our plastics back in 2017, some of our industries left our country and they went to our neighboring countries. That is where they operate from. And so this is a challenge to us. If all of us had similar laws, we would not experience the loss of jobs and revenue. You have nowhere to migrate. Okay, so we will have a level playing field, and we don't make products that are a problem to the other countries. And you know, the globe is a shared resource, and all of us should take responsibility for management of plastics. So, in conclusion, plastic pollution is a global challenge, and I have taken you through the Kenyan initiatives: the ban 2017, the voluntary EPR, mandatory EPR, and the plastic packaging regulations. All users of plastics are expected to demonstrate having an effective take-back scheme. I repeat again, it is not what we call cleanups. If you hear somebody talking of cleanups, we are past that as a country. We are now looking for take-back schemes for all synthetics. So if you are going to use any plastic in Kenya, then you are either regulated through the waste packaging regulations or through EPR, where you have, in both cases, you have to register with the NEMA. About selling of plastics, because they are sometimes sold in our shops. A person shall not sell or offer for sale plastic packaging materials in Kenya unless the name and contacts of that person are printed on the materials. So, so that is what is happening in the country, and sales are not allowed. Only those that have label, meaning that they have been allowed by NEMA. And I said we are in a transition phase. We are doing a phase out. So we are in that process of phasing out. Thank you very much.
Asante sana to Dr. Macharia for that keynote address. And there's a question here. I'm not sure if you were able to spot it as you were continuing. It's in the comment section from Krishna. And I believe, I don't know how much time you have to stay on with us in case there are other questions to follow or responses to your keynote.
I'm available all day. I'm available all day.
Thank you. Thank you. And with what he said right now, I'll also encourage all of us to share our contacts, whether it's email or number, whatever you're comfortable with sharing on this platform, because that's the other purpose of this conversation and webinar, is to be able to continue the conversation after the period that we have for this webinar. So there's a question there by Krishna Ramji, which I believe you're looking at as we continue. And feel free to the rest to throw in your question or comments as you follow the conversation. To what extent are the early stage and growth stage SMEs aware of the 2024 Extended Producer Responsibility Regulation, considering the significant amount of waste they generate? How can we work together to ensure KCV SMEs and pipelines are better informed on the EPR regulation and better understand their responsibilities? Dr.
Well, what I think is that Normally, these SMEs are also members of other umbrella bodies, such as the Kenya Association of Manufacturers. And we have been working together with the Kenya Association of Manufacturers, Kenya National Chamber of Commerce and Industry, also KEPSA. They are the ones who are organizing the public participation meetings. And so there was a lot of awareness. I guess many are aware of the EPR. And since SMEs are also members, are also participating in candidates of our other laws, such as the environmental audit, it is now a requirement that the environmental audit, we query about extended producer responsibility. And extended producer responsibility is not, it doesn't require a lot of things. It just requires registering with NEMA to say that this is my product. And then you go and look for your peers and discuss with them tell them how much waste you generate, and then they'll give you a bill. That's not the NEMA phase. The NEMA phase is register with NEMA, and then go and look for your peers, and then when you are together, the peer will take care of the waste, and the peer rules are forming, and so thank you.
Asante. And
I see other questions.
Yes,
I can see the other
EPR
questions.
Yeah, Gupi, in case that's the one you're looking at, EPR is currently not effective in Kenya. When can we actually see the benefits of EPR and have it fully functional?
EPR has just been born, 2024. So, as I said, we started with enforcement, and you know, enforcement has its own challenges. Challenges of the fact that we are dealing with thousands of companies who are not even registered with NEMA. So we have to rely on registers that are at Kenya Bureau of Standards, that are at KRA. And so it was problematic to us to get who is the legal entity, who can we prosecute in case we find their products in the environment. So then when we wanted to start, the industry went to court, and we are waiting for the court case to come to an end. I would say that EPR enforcement, EPR growth in Kenya will be organic. It will just be like a small child. We have to crawl a bit fast, and then we start walking and then running. I would request that we be patient. Rome was not built in one day. We are getting there. We have the laws. That's a good step, and soon you start seeing the benefits. Yeah.
All right, let's give EPR baby some time before we give them the hard stuff to chew on. Mary Mutemi, thanks, Dr. Macharia. In February 2017, Kenya introduced a ban on plastic carrier bags. In August 2017, the policy became effective. Why do we still have these bags all over in our groceries and mama mbogas? Is NEMA aware? What can we do as a country to ensure total ban?
Your bandwidth is low. I hope mine is not low.
I can hear you now. We lost you for a few seconds, but you are back.
Okay.
Just that question, I'm sure that you've read already by Mary Mutemi
Yes.
on NEMA aware about why we still have these carrier bags all over in the groceries and mama mbogas, and what can be done as a country to ensure a total ban.
Well, we are aware. We are aware about these bags, the jualas, the clear plastic bag. They are still there. What was happening is our law had a gap, and the gap was, as I showed you when I presented the prohibitions under Section 6. In the past, the law had just given a ban. Nobody shall use, shall manufacture, import, export, you know that. But it had left out possess and use, especially possess. You know, you may find somebody with a heap of bags and say, I'm not using, because the law, the ban had said use. So that word possess, when it is absent, it becomes arguable in court. So we had that challenge. So whenever we took our cases to court, they became arguable. And so we had those challenges. The other challenge that we have is, as I said, we need to know where the problem is coming from. It's about plastics they still demand for those bags, even when they are banned, because their uses, we don't have appropriate alternatives even now. And so when we take our cases also to the ODPP, you know, NEMA cannot prosecute. We are not the prosecutors. So they also insist that we bring the manufacturer, the suppliers to court instead of Mama Boga. They say the Mama Boga is the wrong person, and so we have had that challenge. We don't have. We need more support from the members of the public, so that we know who are these suppliers, who are these guys who are bringing those big volumes to the market, so that we can confront them and present them before court. So that is why you see those few pieces of jewelers in the market, but they are reducing. We are on top of things. They are reducing slowly by slowly. We are working with the counties. One of our first target is to make sure that they are not there in county markets. The markets owned by county governments, they should not be there. And then we will continue even to these other private shops. Yeah.
Asante. Dr. Macharia, there's plenty more questions coming in as you continue with the responses, but at this point, because we're getting to 11 o'clock, just to be able to accommodate the panel, and I'm sure that will also generate more questions. I'd also encourage Dr. Macharia, if you have the time, as you are still with us, thank you for allowing, or at least giving that accommodation to your schedule. As you continue, you could respond directly to the questions that are here on the chat section as we continue. However, if not, we will open it to questioning in terms of Q&A after 1 hour, because we really want our 5 panelists to have some good time to respond and also contribute to this. But yes, just follow the conversation and the questions that are coming in there. Many directed to what you brought up in your presentation, in your keynote address. Thank you to those who responded by giving their contacts. That's the whole purpose of this webinar as well, and stakeholders. I encourage as we do so. I've seen Joyce has, and we're starting with Joyce in terms of the Q&A, but for Zacchaeus, just for those who might not know the full representation of your acronym, please put the full representation of that. KNCCI, Zacchaeus Maganga. Asante for that, though. I see your email is there. And to everyone else, please feel free to share any comments as you continue with the conversation. So let's appreciate by way of, the emojis here in terms of Makofi to Daktari, for those who are able to online. And now we can start with the conversation. And Joyce, I'll start with you based on what has been presented by Daktari and who you represent, Joyce. And with the movement towards stricter regulation, tell us what support that PACPRO is offering its clients to ensure compliance by, or at least now that we've started 2025 moving forward.
So thank you, Mark, and thank you, Daktari, for that elucidating presentation. I think for us as PACPRO and as a PRO, our mandate is really to provide, I would say, around 4 areas to our membership. And these are really companies that are obliged, that are putting product into the market. So we provide them with regulatory guidance and expertise. You'll find that a lot of, and you can attest to this in the Q&A. Someone has asked, how can SMEs find out about EPR? So we actually have stepped into that role to provide the expertise around EPR regulations, what is required of companies, what are the products, what are the materials that are subjected to EPR, what are the requirements under the regulation, how do you report what is required of you by the regulator, and beyond that, also to scope out what are the other value addition areas beyond regulatory compliance that can help you, especially when we talk about the fees that we charge. You have to remember that we charge fees for the products that the companies put into the market. And so for us, we have a concept that we have adopted, which is adopted globally by PROs, which is known as eco-modulation. And really this means that the more recyclable your packaging material is, the lower the fees you pay us. Okay, we actually even have a situation where some companies now are using 100% recycled product made and recycled here in Kenya. And so you can see that they're getting that benefit fully. So those are some of the things we do. I've spoken, of course, around the compliance support, and I think Dr. Macharia has really spoken to this. And this is where we are doing the take-back schemes to drive collection, to promote recycling. We do have a situation, of course, where we have unrecyclable packaging materials in the market. And so that also presents a challenge for us. And so what are the alternative pathways that we can be able to ensure that this waste does not get into the dump site? And so that becomes our burden. In essence, what the PRO does and what PACPRO does is we step in to become an intermediary between the companies, the manufacturers, brand owners, and the regulator. And we handle their compliance needs, their regulatory issues for them. We also are promoting and ensuring that all our members are tracking their waste. And this is the waste that they generate from the factory. Despite that not being within our ambit, because we are supposed to manage post-consumer waste, we are ensuring that companies are compliant, even with the segregation at source requirements, where you have different bins for different waste categories within your factories and within your office setups. This is something that we are driving and striving to do. And the reason also is we do not want to use our members' resources to recover their waste from their industrial processes, because we have to pay for it. And so we almost will end up using those resources in the least efficient way, okay? Because we're supposed to be driving recovery of post-consumer waste. And so we advocate for our companies to actually ensure that their waste that they generate from their processes and their lines is actually going to a recycler or is being treated accordingly in line with the law. Then, of course, fee setting, and I've spoken to this because this is critical. We are not the ones who set the fees. Our members set the fees based off of the guidance we give them, which is what are the costs of net costs of recovery? What are the administrative costs that we require, communication and awareness, and as well as the recycling costs. Once we put that together, then we are able to set some minimum fees that they pay per ton for the packaging material that they put into the market. And then, of course, lastly, I would talk about collaboration and networking. I think for us, and just like, you know, the SDGs, partnerships are critical. In Kenya, we are not the first country to deploy EPR. We have our own local context, but we try to learn from other jurisdictions. That is number one. So we also have programs where there's a lot of innovation going on. I think 2 years ago, we had a program where we were trying to shift the PET. This is the packaging material that you use, that is used for soda, drinking water, primarily. To shift it from the colored shade that it has, usually blue in our market, to clear. And 80% of the companies that participated in that challenge were actually our members. We have seen them actually scale. And beyond that, even the companies that did not participate are now switching to clear PET packaging in our market. And then, of course, there's a lot of collaboration with our regulator, with the county governments, with and other partners, like-minded partners. just to be able to align our objectives, which are to bring inclusivity to the value chain. How do we streamline the processes? I think, as Dr. Macharia has rightly put it, EPR is very young in our country. There's a learning curve we are all going through before we are able to actually say we have got it right. And so trying to put everyone in the value chain together, where principles of fairness, equity in terms of how resources are being distributed, because they are not finite. They are not, with their finite resources, we are not able to spread everything everywhere, but we have to be able to optimize what we have so that then we're able to move the needle around collection and recycling. So I would say those are the key areas that we are driving. And then, of course, lastly, advocacy. Advocacy is critical. For our companies, there are issues always because enforcement is an issue. You have to constantly engage with the regulator, different ministries, different stakeholders. So it's about being able to provide engagement, especially around what is moving, what is changing. Dr. Macharia spoke about the plastics treaty. That will have an impact on our manufacturers. So we have to keep abreast on that and be able to provide that knowledge to the companies we represent.
Thank you for that response. And I see in Jombai Solomon, you're speaking about the regulations and advocacy and keeping abreast with the changes globally or even locally. And he's given his contacts there as the advocate of the High Court in Environmental Matters and ESG specialist. Thank you for that. And thank you to the rest who've been giving their contacts as we continue, just so that we can keep the same kind of response in terms of what has just been presented. And I'll also just encourage Dr. Macharia to respond to the questions on the comment section. You can do that directly or even on the same group chat section so that everyone can follow the responses. James, from where you sit as the CEO of Kenya Extended Producer Responsibility Organization, yes, Daktari has said that, EPR is still a baby, but what can you call as measurable outcomes you've seen since this framework was brought?
Okay, thank you very much, Mark, for that question. So from a KIFFWA standpoint, and as Dr. Macharia had already indicated, we started as a voluntary scheme back in 2021. And of course, also by extension, speaking to the other initiatives within the sector, this was an initiative being undertaken by visionary leaders within the manufacturing and production ecosystem in Kenya. So at KIFFWA, based on that, and we must also be cognizant of the fact that the journey has been from a voluntary to a semi-voluntary, where we had the act coming into place, but we didn't have the regulations. And we were soon getting into the mandatory phase, but that has, of course, been put on hold by the judicial process. So quickly, in terms of numbers, as KIFFWA...
Go ahead, just to sanitize what we were responding to. We were talking about the baby that is EPR, and KIFFWA definitely, much as Daktari has said that this is a baby, there are some teething problems, but rather than look at the negatives, we want to look at the positives of what is a measurable impact that you've seen so far, much as it is a baby. What can you call some gains?
Okay, so before I was interrupted, I was going to the statistics, the hard figures as far as the impact is concerned, and I was saying through the direct intervention of our members, and here I'm talking about the EPR fees that they contribute to the scheme. We have been able to engage around 13 recyclers to date, of course at a national level, and that has in effect meant that we have directly contributed to the collection and recycling of over 64,000 metric tons to date since we started our operations back in 2021. Out of that 64,000 metric tons, 18,000 metric tons is in the form of plastics. And of course, this is differentiated across all the different types of plastics, both hard and soft plastics, or rather flexible plastics. And to be able to ensure that we are scaling up that recycling ecosystem, working with these recyclers as our partners, we have to ordinarily do some sort of a capital injection through a subsidy-based program where we approach and we engage recyclers who have the capacity, but have certain limitations to arrive at their optimum levels of production. And so we do a capital injection, and that has seen us directly inject over 200 million Kenya shillings to date to the recyclers in that space. And we've seen meaningful steps as far as them being able to increase their capacities, as far as their capacities, as far as their collection and recycling rates are concerned. So as far as the obligated producers are concerned, that has also been a notable form of impact as far as awareness creation and them jumping onto the bandwagon as far as buying into the vision and the promise of EPR. We have now seen to date over 1,000 producers who are obligated by the law joining us and having us help them in terms of ticking off the boxes as far as the EPR laws are concerned, but also going over and above to obtain the social license to operate as sustainable conscious brands in the context of what they are putting out to the market, and also in a sense minimizing the environmental consequences of their products in the environment. We, as an organization, are also expected to undertake awareness creation on behalf of our producers. And of course, this is intended to implore upon our consumers to ensure that they're actually coming out as strong environmental stewards, but also equally supporting their brands to be sustainable in their post-consumer waste collection and conversion. So here we have conducted quite a series of nationwide awareness campaigns, of course also leveraging on both digital and mainstream media platforms to share knowledge on sustainable waste management practices and the resultant regulatory frameworks such as the Sustainable Waste Management Act and the EPR regulations. Last year alone, we conducted over 200 awareness forums. And of course, these are also in-person town hall sessions where the intention is to instigate social dialogue, to interrogate what are the root causes or challenges that we are facing as communities with respect to waste management practices, and how best then can we be able to address those challenges. Another obligation placed on producers as far as the EPR regulations are concerned is on capacity building of the informal waste actors. So in addition to sharing of information, we are also supposed to equip them with the necessary tools and equipment relevant for them or important for them to be able to undertake their duties. So here we've been able to work with quite a number of informal waste actors, not only providing them with the relevant knowledge and seeing that they can be able to move from informal business models to much more formalized business models. And in the intermediate period, we also issued them with PPEs. So last year we distributed around 1,500 PPEs just to be able to ensure their safety as they're in the field doing the collection and recycling of waste. A critical element that, of course, Joyce and Dr. Ayub have alluded to is on matters, the recyclability levels of some of these packaging and products that we are putting into the Kenyan market. And so we also saw it needful that in addition to the interventions such as eco-modulation of the EPR fees, we needed to have a deliberate conversation on design for recyclability. But before getting to the design for recyclability, we must also answer the question of what is a business case for a producer to transition towards more circular business models or circular forms of packaging, because really that transition can also be not only time consuming, but equally financially a huge undertaking for most of these producers to change their production processes and production line. So the intention for these sessions on design for recyclability is for them to see the business case that in addition to not only future-proofing your business model, there are long-term costs or financial benefits that a business or a brand stands to gain once they are able to adopt circular forms of packaging. So in a nutshell, those, I think, at the top of my mind would be a few of the impact stories we've seen and the significant or positive outcomes we've seen as far as adoption of EPR in the Kenyan context, moving from a voluntary to a semi-voluntary and potentially ultimately to voluntary experience for Kenyan brands. Over to you, Mark.
So just as a reference there to what Dr. Macharia had referred to earlier, as a reason why there's a challenge in, the plastics, at least what is being phased out, or we had hoped to have phased out by now, is not yet phased out. It's because, and he said, and I jotted this down, there's no reasonable, feasible plastic alternative. So with this, I'll bring it to Rajesh, and Raj, being the MD of Alternative Energy Systems, there's this pyrolysis and this method that I'd have to even look at the proper pronunciation and the definition of it, which is a process in which substances are changed chemically by high temperatures. But as you probably heard that comment by Dr. Macharia, there's no reasonable, feasible plastic alternative. What would you say in your view? And I'll start with the third question that we were looking to tackle with you, and the structural or market level challenges you've encountered in building a viable business model for synthetic oil within the circular economy, and what measures are you taking to accelerate adoption in the foreseeable future? Oh, sorry, Raj, you're still on mute. Sorry, Raj. Gotcha. Oops, still on mute.
Okay. That you can hear me now? Great. Okay,
yeah.
Mark, the challenges that we have faced in chemical recycling in Kenya are basically revolve around three separate sectors. One is that historically, waste management has been handled by the informal sector. So it is very difficult for recyclers to obtain regular and sustainable supply levels. The second area that I think we faced a challenge with is enforcement. Now, when I talk about enforcement, our product, our finished product, actually has higher environmental benefits in terms of its usage. And I'm referring to air emissions here. Now, unfortunately, what we find is that the enforcement of the air emissions in Kenya are not being done to the levels that they are required to be. And finally, I think a bigger challenge is the cost. Recycled synthetic oil is obviously more expensive than petroleum products. And it's been difficult to get players in the market to understand that they have to pay a higher price for a product which A, is from recycled materials, and B, has greater environmental effects. So those are the main challenges that we as a company have faced. Now, going forward, we are looking at trying to increase our capacity such that we can enter into the circular model, whereby this synthetic oil, which is a key ingredient for the preparation of virgin material, the European Union has actually implemented or executed a law whereby all new plastic being manufactured by the refineries has to have a certain element of recycled content. And in order to break into that market, we need to increase our capacity. So our future lies in being able to increase our volume such that we can then enter into the circular economy definition by the European Union. Over to you, Mark.
Asante, Raj, for that. And as we're now moving to, because we've spoken to the issue of the EPR and the framework and how far we've come, and now we're talking with people who are actually doing something about it in terms of practical steps. I'd like to go to Mary, and then I'll throw it to Ikrit. And Mary, you stand at a point as a founder of Takataka Nimali of being the ambassador to change the mindset. And even as we bring in the regulations and stricter rules to be able to put this framework in place, see less of plastics in the environment or use of certain plastics in the environment, you have the opportunity to convince communities to see it differently, as whatever is there now, whatever is in use can be seen as wealth and not necessarily something to throw to waste. So to the first question that we had foreseen for this conversation, what is working for you with the communities, at least as a touch point? The practical steps have proven most effective in getting them to think of plastic waste more as an asset, an economic asset.
So thank you. And as you have said, Takataka Nimali is a Swahili word that says waste is wealth. And what we've done by choice of that particular slogan was the first step of us trying to change the mindset and really making a lot of noise that there's a lot of resource and there's a lot of wealth in what we perceive as waste. So when I started, Takataka Nimali was after recognition that I was given by the UN as the UN Person of the Year 2017, and I made a commitment to be an environment ambassador. And that recognition came from my other entities, Line Plus Group, where we are converting plastic waste. And I thought, because I'm not an environmentalist, what I would do was to look for different models of how we can create enterprises within the waste management value chain. And that is what we have done. So the Takataka Nimali was to literally give that perception, not perception, but really to bring out the value in waste. And I think it's a slogan that is used a lot. What we do and what we have really seen working with the community is that the community needs to hear, and they need to see, and they need to experience, they need to understand. It's not just telling them that waste is wealth, but what we do in our capacity building and our training is to give experiential training. So we come in with different set of plastic products. In plastic, they have different categories. They have different grades of plastics. There's PET, there's HDPE, there's a PP, and really showing them to make them understand the difference between the PET, the PP, and the PEs. Then adapting that language to what is well understood on the ground. Because you get, and we have said that the plastics are managed by the informal sector. So we try to break it down to a language that they understand. When you go to the training, you get a training that is how they refer the PET is practicality of maybe what is packed mostly in the PET. So we break down the plastic grades into a language that they understand. And some of them is not just about the names, it is also about the fields. So we come up with different ways of how it is that we can be able to show them to differentiate between the different plastics. And apart from that, we train them and make them understand the whole life cycle of plastic and why it is necessary to separate the plastics from one another, either in terms of in different grades, and in terms of different colors. We make them understand that when you get a batch of PET plastics that are clear, another one are blue, another one are maybe green, depending on the different colors that are in the market, it makes work easier for the recycler. So it makes sense for you then to demand a higher cost when you're selling your plastic. Then when you separate your PET bottles with the cup, then you also make it easier for the recycler to be able to work on it. Hence, we've been able to move the costs of different plastics in the market from very low values when we got into the market to values now in terms that the recyclers are buying the plastics at higher cost. We also link them with the recycler, because it is one thing to know what you need to know to separate, but also to know where the market is. We have developed a digital platform that we call Ecomali. And the reason why we have developed that digital platform is because the informal sector, they are very fragmented. They have small volumes and they are all over the country. So it then means that if you have very small volume, it doesn't make it's not viable economically for a recycler to come and buy your plastics. So there has been models where we have many middlemen in the value chain, so that the people who are collecting the plastics end up getting very minimal. So with the digital platform, which we've created a marketplace, then the waste collectors are able to put in their volume in the digital platform. They are visible by the recyclers, and then the recyclers can see when they have viable volumes, which we advocate for at least a ton of plastics before you call in a recycler. It makes then economic viability for them to be able to go and buy that. So trying to give them visibility by removing the middlemen then encourages them, because they get more resources by their plastics are bought at higher prices in the market by the recycler. The other thing that we also try to do with them is to make them understand that yes, you are selling the plastics now for the people who are recycling, but there are also other models in terms of upcycling that can be done within your own premises, so that you can then come up with products that are able to give you higher value. Then there are also different recycling technologies that we try to introduce in the market, and just training them and linking them with the people who are doing the actual work. You've seen a lot of making poles, a lot of making bricks. These are simple technologies that the waste collectors are able to embark onto. But unless this is brought into their understanding and seeing how it is done, then they are not able to embrace that technology. So what we have seen working is just making them see, making them understand, and simplifying it for them to be able to uptake it for their value.
Basically breaking it down for them into ways that they can understand. And it creates to you, and from where you stand in a daily operational standpoint, could you give us some numbers in terms of what you could measure for us for PET bottles? PET bottles, more technically known as, and I had to refer to this, polyethylene terephthalate. I hope that's right. Basically, the bottles that are used for packaging soft drinks, water, and juice. What numbers do you have for us in terms of what you've been able to recycle, perhaps maybe over the last 12 months, and what impact this has had in reducing plastic waste in Kenya?
Yes, Mark, I think you pronounced it very well. It is polyethylene terephthalate. So once again, my name is Akrit, and a very good question. So at T3, we're actually recycling quite a large number on a day-to-day basis. So if I put it into figures in the last 12 months, we've managed approximately 8,400 metric tons, and to quantify it, it would translate to about 525 million bottles in the 12 months. So we're looking at about 1.5 million bottles a day. It seems like a lot, but I think there's much more out in the environment with a population of about 60 million people. I'm sure there's much more that we can tap into. So though the 1.5 million bottles a day are quite significant, considering it's mostly post-consumer waste, so it's come across Kenya. We have about 7 centers across the country where we're collecting it, baling it, and transporting it to the factory in Kitengela. So we have a network of about 7 aggregation centers, buyback hubs, and we have suppliers delivering it directly to the factory. So beyond the numbers, though, the impact is twofold, right? The impact to the economy and the social impact that it's had. So we've, despite diverting the millions of bottles from the landfills, dump sites, and the water bodies, rivers, oceans, etc., we've provided a stable market or stable jobs for about 1,500 informal waste pickers, just by creating a steady demand for the post-consumer PET. So it gives them a steady day-to-day job, which is paid well. I mean, we strive to pay a fair price, so it dignifies the income as well for recycling. So basically for T3, it's about creating value. So both environmentally and also economically. So creating the jobs, stable jobs for the waste pickers, and creating a very sustainable rPET product for the buyer as well. Out of something that would have been considered as waste, taka, right? And apart from that, sort of physical impact that we can see, right? Bottles going away from the environment, jobs being created. I think we've successfully sort of structured an end-of-life pathway for these PET bottles, which in return shifts the public behavior and just the notion on what PET bottles are, right? Whereby like everyone has mentioned before me, plastic is looked at as, plastic is a problem, but it's more of the infrastructure, more of the mindset that, plastic was made for a reason. It's flexible, it's lightweight, it's safe to use. So the real problem that we need to find a solution for is the disposal of it, right? T3 as the factory, we can recycle it. Our biggest challenge is the feedstock and working with EPR on, how can we make PET or other recyclables to be attractive to the waste picker, that it's worth their time to pick one bottle at a time. But also we've seen quite some strong collaboration from bottlers and standardization bodies on designing for recyclabilities. So with us being in the market, recycling a lot of plastic, it creates this momentum, and everyone wants to be part of it. So a lot of bottlers are designing for recyclabilities. You'll see large brands have shifted from blue bottles to clear bottles, green bottles to clear colored bottles, just to sort of make these bottles more recyclable. We're now working with, it's a collective collaboration of everybody to make these bottles more recyclable, all the way from the label to the cap and the color and the composition of these bottles. So yeah, in a nutshell, I think the impact is very visual, but I think we see quite a bright future as well in terms of the work being done to increasing this collection as well, so that we can go to our current maybe 5-10% of collection rate to 80-90% as well.
Thank you for that. And in the same breath to you, Joyce, from PackPro, tell us about the innovations that, in packaging design that you're helping clients reduce waste, and how are you tracking this adoption rate among manufacturers? Akrita just mentioned it, from the use of the colored PET bottles to the clear ones. What else have you managed to know?
So thank you, Mark. And maybe just additive to what Akrita said is, I think it's essential to know that as a country, and especially for PET packaging, which is really one of the most recyclable packaging materials we have in the market, we do have a standard that we developed with the Kenya Bureau of Standards, alongside, of course, other stakeholders. But what this is really geared to achieving is that it's supposed to allow for a guide in how we use recycled PET, especially for food grade purposes, which is really being able to put that same PET into a new bottle that can be used to pack your beverage, soft drink, water, etc. And so that's been a milestone for us. And I think now, similar to what James had spoken to earlier, you can't have design for recycling taking effect or a circular economy without tax incentives. It doesn't work. It's not sustainable. And so for us, I think the next port of call, of course, is going to be around what fiscal incentives can we get for companies that are using recycled content in their packaging, number one. Number two, what can we get some regulations around percentages that are minimum percentages for recycled content in packaging, so that the government, we are able to have companies getting the benefit, a tax benefit, because packaging is one of the most taxed items. Whether you look at your finance bill this year, previously, or years before that, you find that because it's so highly taxed, to drive circular economy is not going to be very easy if we're not able to give requisite incentives where we're able to have differentiation around the companies that are having recycled content should pay less in terms of the packaging tax compared to those that are using 100% virgin, and also different types of categories for the packaging materials, especially where you have alternatives. The situation we have now at present, because we don't have any tax differentiation, is that anyone can use any type of packaging, no matter how unrecyclable it is, because the penalties are more or less the same. And so this is really one of the things we're really striving to drive around advocacy, so that we are able to leverage a bigger pool of willing companies, because companies, their bottom line and their top line is money. Okay. And so if you're not speaking that language, we are not going to be able to really hit the nail on the head. And so it's important for us to be able to balance the two. But today we have companies, I mean, Ikrit has spoken to Coca-Cola, we have Bidco Africa, I think and many other water companies, Mark. I'm sure before you drink your water bottle, you have seen a seal on your closure, on your bottle top. You have to kind of peel it off before you get to your bottle top to open it. And a lot of companies are doing away with that seal. What that does is we're reducing the amount of plastic we're putting into the packaging. And before, it had been deemed that that is how you tell that it's a safe product, you know. But it's been discovered we don't need that. There are other options. And so now we are seeing that shift. It's very strategic, but very critical when we talk about design for recycling. And you have to look at the ethos of design for recycling as we need to reduce the amount of packaging material that we are putting into a product. Labels are another problem. We are dealing with a big issue when it comes to labels. And so we are trying to shift a lot of our brand owners to more recyclable packaging, but labels, but more labels that are easy to recover. Okay, a lot of the labels in our market today are very hard to recover. Some are stuck to the product with glue, which contaminates the recycled product. And so you find that that entire product is rejected at the recycling plant. And so trying to shift this, and we're doing this using, of course, the fees that I spoke to. Our EPR fees, when we eco-modulate them, the more recyclable your packaging is, okay, the lower the fees you pay us. Today, for example, companies like Unilever, who is our member, you find that the Vim, Domestos, that Sunlight they put into the scoring powders they put into the market is made of 100% recycled plastic made from our country, okay? Our shopping bags, our garbage bags that come to your houses are actually made up of 100% recycled material. And so how do we drive this? And I think for us, critically where we feel like we are going to move the needle is around advocacy on tax differentiation, tax incentives, so that we have a larger pool of companies that are looking to move into circularity because of the financial bottom line.
Thank you for that, Joyce. And again, in response from a stakeholder that works closely in the ecosystem, James from KIFFWA, you could tell us, and she's mentioned the financial incentives for you in terms of priority areas. You could tell us a few of your priority interventions that you are looking to help in reducing post-consumer plastic waste in the next few years.
Thank you, Mark. I think without belaboring the point, I think more emphasis will be going towards awareness creation and sensitization, both from an upstream and downstream intervention. When you're talking about post-consumer waste, I think really even at ideation stage as far as the design for packaging and products is concerned, then you're seeing that a producer must also be cognizant of all these fundamental issues as far as the circular economy principles are concerned and the waste hierarchy, of course, is concerned to, or rather with reference to reduction, reuse and the likes. So these are things that we must also equip our producers with as far as information sharing is concerned. for them to have an appreciation of what they mean as far as a reduction of the post-consumer waste in Kenya is concerned. The other bit would be on a few of the issues that have been touched by both Ikrit and Joyce on reconsidering our design forms. So when you're talking about labeling, there are certain adhesives that now make it very difficult for the recyclers to deal with some of these forms of packaging. So dissuading producers and asking them to shift towards different forms of labeling, and also contribute to the reduction of consumer waste in the environment, and more particularly plastic waste. So the shift towards other forms of packaging is also nice to have, and this would be done through, in addition to the bit about awareness creation, then deliberate action from a policy and advocacy point of view, working with the National Environment Management Authority, the revenue authorities, and the like. Also have incentives that would now better incentivize adoption of maybe mono-material forms of packaging and potential elimination of problematic plastics. I think can also be something that would now be much more, or rather ensure more proactive measures or steps by producers towards adopting sustainable forms of packaging. And of course, this would now encourage more recycling and ensure that which is defining itself in the environment is reduced. As far as the downstream intervention is concerned, I think we are also very deliberate in terms of scaling up collection and recycling efforts. So investments in recycling infrastructure, whether in the form of adaptive solutions for communities, and of course also injection in the existing businesses within the recycling ecosystem. So, and lastly, of course, engaging the consumers. At KIFFWA, we believe that the consumer is a primary stakeholder as far as waste management is concerned. As long as Mark James is not properly disposing of their waste, then really, however much the producers are going to pump in money into the ecosystem, then there's only so much you can be able to achieve. So information intended to drive responsible behavior and encourage inspired action as far as environmental stewardship is concerned, we also feel would be a nice way to significantly reduce the post-consumer plastic waste we are finding in our environment. Yeah.
Thank you for that, James, and that perspective of looking at the consumer as a primary target in this effort. But you've also mentioned investment in the infrastructure of recycling, and that's something that Raj is very clear on in terms of new technology, at least the technology he's using, and pyrolysis technology. What has been the difficulty you have faced, Raj, whether it is in regulation or even financing? We're hearing, financing incentives. What aspects have you faced as a barrier in this aspect?
Mark, as I had said earlier, the biggest challenge in recycling is the cost of recycling. As much as we're hearing a lot about what the PROs are doing on this, I think there has been a disconnect between ourselves as recyclers, and we have an association called the Kenya Association of Waste Recyclers, and the PROs, the producer responsibility organizations, as to what the actual cost of recycling is. As the PROs are really representing the manufacturers of waste, they, in my opinion, are not totally neutral in the discussions around the cost of recycling. Pyrolysis as a technology is a very expensive technology to implement. And what we find is that we are actually handling a portion of waste which cannot be handled through mechanical recycling, which is what has been happening in Kenya all along. I've just heard James talk about an investment in recyclers, but if I could be wrong here, James, and forgive me if I am, but I think you have mainly concentrated on mechanical recycling without actually engaging recyclers on the actual cost of recycling and the cost of their end product. Joyce alluded to the question of the recycled content in the manufacturing sector. Unfortunately, Mark, till today, I think that is a concept which is more or less being accepted on a voluntary basis and is not mandated by NEMA. And I endorse what Joyce has said, that we need NEMA to come in and assist us in having government policy on the recycled content in any new manufacturing. But I do believe that NEMA also has to assist or become an arbitrator or a mediator between the recyclers and the producers on understanding the actual costs involved in recycling, and then come up with a model whereby recycling actually makes financial sense and becomes sustainable. As far as pyrolysis is concerned, we actually are handling what is known as end-of-life plastic, which is the cheapest plastic that you can find, or plastic that nobody else wants to buy. And it becomes important, like Ikrit said, that we provide for a fair wage for waste pickers to collect that form of plastic. Unfortunately, it's very light, and whereas a person or a waste picker can collect 50, 60 kilos of hard plastics in a day, it becomes very difficult for a waste picker to collect that quantity in terms of the light and film plastics, as we call them. And in order to incentivize waste pickers to collect that kind of plastic, we need to increase the remuneration for them. But that's where there is a missing link between the waste recyclers and the PROs. And if Dr. Ayub is still online, we are hoping that NEMA comes in and acts as an arbitrator or a mediator to try and make people understand the true cost of collecting and recycling waste.
Thank you for that. And still in the name of cost of recycling waste, something that you encounter on a daily, and I'll bring it to Ikrit as well, but right now to Mary, first of all, with Takataka Nimali, and knowing the co-convener for this conversation, KIFFWA, that is the Kenya Innovative Financing Facility for Water. How are you making sure that water use is optimal and there's wastewater management in your operations? And with KIFFWA being one of the stakeholders and the bodies supporting, what support do you need to strengthen this area?
So thank you, and thank you for bringing the conversation around water. And I'll start maybe with the whole ecosystem of the waste value chain. When you come into the recovery, how waste is recovered would determine how much water will be used when cleaning that to process, to palletizing. So when we are pushing the sorting and separation of waste as source, what we are really trying to do is to minimize the contamination of the plastics so that that plastic is collected when it is clean and you don't have to use so much water by the time you're cleaning to make the recycled plastics. So then from recycling, when you're recycling, the process of recycling, again, you can use a closed loop system. So that the closed loop system, you will clean your water. And I'll give an example of what I'm doing in my plastic conversion company. So we are converting plastics and we are using recycled plastics in some of our components. We are buying from the recyclers. And I will talk about the conversion because we have not talked about plastic conversion here. So in our processing, what we have chillers that are chilling the pneumatic movement of our machinery. So we are using water. So we have a closed loop that water moves to cool the machinery, go back to the chiller. It is cleaned and goes back into the water system. then our water waste in one of our production where we are manufacturing cosmetics, we've put in an effluent treatment plant that collects all the wastewater. That water is treated, and then we introduce back that water into the system for cleaning or flushing our toilet, where we don't really need to use water that is pure. So there are different technologies that can be used to manage wastewater and to reduce how much water we are using. So where I see KIFFWA would come in is to understand what technologies can be used in the country, within the industry, and be able to support such technologies. Then I come into the conversation within the whole value chain that we've talked about. We talked about collecting, we are recycling, and then we want to convert that. A lot of time when we talk about the circular economy, we are ending up at collecting waste and recycling, and we are not taking it to converting into product. We need to start having conversation on what products can we convert using recycled plastics. And I like that Joyce has said that we have been pushing. I sit in Joyce's board, I sit in the board of PACPRO. So we've been part in pushing to see that we have standards for food grade PET. But there's a lot of other use of recycled plastic products that we can start developing. And I'll give examples in the water infrastructure system. Imagine we are doing irrigation. We don't need to make our dripping tubes with virgin plastics. We can make dripping tubes with recycled plastics. We can do water tanks, storage water systems. We can do using recycled plastics. The rain harvesting systems, whether they are the gutters and all that, all these are products that are being used, that are being converted using recycled plastics. So we need to look at the whole value chain from an ecosystem approach. Then we look into which areas can we invest in to develop more use of the recycled plastics. So because if we recover, we recycle. We are now have had, I'm also working with T3. We have had T3 saying that the problem they are having is feedstock. We are going to then start having another problem of what product are we making. Then we end up maybe exporting all the products, but how can we tap on what we have developed within the value chain to make products that are within the system? That way, we are able to unlock investment in the whole value chain, from collection, in the infrastructure, in the recycling, and the manufacturers who are converting products using recycled component. Then the whole EPR system, we can be able to do that. We cannot do this without data. So data becomes a huge component to help making informed decision. An example I will say, if you have to invest in an infrastructure for sorting and separating of waste, we have one that we have introduced a technology in KCV. We brought in the first automated sorting and separating equipment for municipality waste. And that was a project we are doing with the county and other different partners. But if we don't have the actual amount of data of waste that is being collected within that municipality, then we are not able to make a decision of what is the right equipment or the right technology that can be introduced into that municipality. So the same in production. If we do not know how much plastics we are recovering, then we're not able to make decisions on what conversion investments we can be able to do. So data becomes key. And this is why for us as Takataka Nimali, our focus is in data, and our focus is introducing new technologies within the waste management value chain.
That is something that ICREET definitely respects and appreciates, with the 8,400 metric tons of PET bottles that he was talking about, and the impact therein. You could also add on to the measures you put in place in terms of the water consumption and treating wastewater management in your operations as T3 ICREET, and what you feel the impact investors can amplify and do in your space to support even better.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. And very well said, Mary. So it's definitely a great point, and water usage is very relevant to our operations at T3. in PET recycling, especially in the system that we're using, which is known as hot wash, where we use water at about 90 degrees. We definitely use a lot of water. So right now we're using about 60,000 liters a day, and we're running about one shift. And when we go to 2 shifts, you can double that. So our consumption will at least be 100 to 120,000 liters of water a day. As a company who is deeply committed to sustainability, we realize there's a contradiction here, because we're trying to clean up plastic waste from the environment, but then pressurizing another vital resource like water, right? Especially in Kenya and in the area that we're in Kitengela. So purely because of these sentiments, we've set up a closed loop water treatment plant, or an effluent treatment plant, and it allows us to reuse about 80% of the water that we're consuming on a daily basis. So it reduces our freshwater usage, and also additional to that, there are water shortages we have in the area. So in Kitengela, we have water rationing from Thursday through to Sunday. That makes us, that forces us rather to get bowsers from Nairobi, and then again puts pressure on our sustainability agenda, whereby we're getting trucks bringing water all the way like 50 kilometers to us and going back empty. So water efficiency and resource management is very integral to our operations, right? In our process itself, we add some anti-foaming agents, and we use little amounts of detergent. And in the ETP, we neutralize the pH of the water so that we reduce our discharge, and whatever we do discharge that is not being used in our process again, it's compliant with the NEMA and local environmental regulations. There's a question on the impact of that investors can have in this area, right? And I personally feel that this is exactly where impact capital can make a difference, because water recycling systems and ETPs are actually more expensive for us. They're not cheap upfront, definitely. That's the capex, but even the opex, running them on a day-to-day basis, it is more expensive for us to recycle this water per liter than for us to even get bowsers or get from our water connection from the EPZ. But again, because of our values and ethics, we have put in this infrastructure to recycle it. But this is where now the impact investors can come in, because this is where they can play a vital role in scaling green operations, right? Or at least making green operations a bit more attractive to the Mwananchi. So I believe this can work well with like blended models, because banks definitely don't see the benefit in this. Now they are, but still very tough to convince them. They want to know the ROI on an effluent treatment plant, and you really can't show that. So I think blended finance between private equity and public capital, this is where it can come together and, accelerate the adoption of clean and efficient recycling infrastructures.
Thank you, Creed. So blended finance, and from your perspective, James, as KIFFWA, how do you see your role coming in the industry, whether it's benchmarking or giving support systems for water efficient practices, all in the framework of BPR?
Okay, thank you, Mark. I think just riding on the point by Creed, looking at over 120,000 liters per day, a quick back of the hand calculation will tell you that they are using over 40 million liters per year. So that, of course, now requires a lot of forecast, of course, because it goes beyond the operational bit, but also now comes in as a sustainability imperative. So I think in terms of KIFFWA, the first thing as far as standards development is concerned is just trying to have conversations. And of course, this is now some sort of a call to action to all of us in this call, to have deliberate discussions with the regulators and of course the waste management operators led by the recyclers, to establish what we'd be calling context-specific standards. Because really, I think the other problem we've had is borrowing standards that are not necessarily adaptable or implementable within our context. So having those discussions and leveraging what is already happening when you're talking about closed loop systems that we are seeing in T3, Takataka Solutions and all other recyclers in the country, then how best can we then move from 80% reuse to potentially 100% reuse? The other thing would, of course, be on sludge management, because I know that is also a huge headache that they have to contend with. So, of course, from an EPR and ensuring that there is scaled adoption of the term, I think there is also a discussion. Here we've been talking with the Kenya Association of Waste, or rather, KEWI, Kenya Environmental, is it Kenya Water Institute, sorry, where we are saying we need to also start developing standards for embedding reporting of EPR, where we're ensuring that they're also working with recyclers from a life cycle assessment to include the water usage as far as collection and retrieval from the environment is concerned. The other thing I see as an intermediary intervention would be on capacity building and initiatives, incentives rather, where we are talking about developing what we'd call circularity scorecards. So working with recyclers not only to adopt low water usage technologies, but also exploring incentivization mechanisms just for them to also take advantage of that. I mean, even as they're talking about plastics credit, then can we also add an element of efficient water reuse or water usage at our recycling facilities through eco-labeling procedures or standards for the recyclers. Additionally, very basic steps as far as cleaning of and proper separation of waste that's sought by the consumers would also negate the need for utilization of some of these quantities of water. When you're talking about the hot water cleaning, we know that the recyclers, when they're dealing with post-industrial waste, they do not necessarily need to use hot wash lines. So how can we then try and have consumers also taking advantage or being empowered to contribute to the reduction of the need for use of water, hot water, to clean the post-consumer waste before it gets into the recycling plants? I think that would also directly contribute to the reduction of the water that our recyclers are using within their facilities. So lastly, I think those are just a few of the pointers, but I think it requires a comprehensive undertaking, both above the line and below the line intervention, as far as deliberate conversations between regulators, waste management operators, and the obligated brand owners, as well as really the consumers, to understand that this is more of a shared responsibility, not just in terms of material recovery, but also as an aspect, a critical aspect of resource stewardship and environmental protection.
Dr. James, and from one PRO to another, Joyce, over to you as CEO of Packaging Producer Responsibility Organization, and I'll borrow a bit of what has been posted there in the question chat section by Guppy Kent. And as you speak about integrating sustainability and how you do that in packaging solutions you offer, you could also respond to what has been posted there in terms of when the EPR will be implemented and what NEMA and PROs such as yourself are doing to ensure the implementation is going to be seamless as much as possible.
Okay, so thank you, Mark. So let me start with the issue on sustainability. I think for us as a PRO, and like all PROs, our key mandate is to drive sustainability from two fronts. One is from the industry perspective, where we are focusing, of course, on design for recycling, at the consumer level, reusing, reducing, and recycling. But then also from the second level is really around the sustainability development goals, which are really, we are focusing on driving responsible consumption and production, but also trying to promote decent work and economic growth, because where our work lies is really around the green economy, trying to promote green growth. And so for us, when we look at where our sustainability being pushed at the industrial level, is really around the material selection. We are trying to get more companies to move to more recyclable materials where they can. Okay. And for where they are not able to, we are actually actively pursuing engagement with key strategic partners. We have the experts in Europe, as well as a pool of experts that Mary here actually represents around the International Solid Waste Association. She is the chairperson for the East African chapter. And so how can we bring a pool of those experts so that we are able to have cross learnings for our manufacturers, especially where they are using plastics that are difficult to recycle or materials that are difficult to recycle, to see what other alternatives we can get and what are the alternative treatment processes that we can use. Then, of course, lightweighting is a big thing. I've spoken to it, which is where really a lot of our manufacturers are reducing the amount of plastic they are using in their packaging materials. So we have a lot of, this is very widespread in the PET material, where a lot of the soda, drinking water that is currently in the market has actually been reduced in terms of the grammage that is being put into the market of plastic per unit. And then promoting, of course, circular economy principles. So beyond design for recycling and reducing the amount of plastic that they are using within factories. Okay, do we have the reuse of industrial packaging material that can be used? For instance, and I can use Miri because she's here, at her company, at Lineplast Group, HDPE, they reuse it within the facility. We have another company, Biofoods. They are using their PP to make the yogurt cups within the factory. So as opposed to letting this material get out of the facility, going into another value chain where we have to pay for it to be recovered, how best can we drive this? And then, of course, now when we look at sustainability through the lens of the SDGs, the value chain is critical. I think Raj mentioned that the informal sector is the backbone of recovery in our market. And so for us, how do we integrate them better by ensuring that what we are getting from our manufacturers that they pay to us is actually trickling down to them? I actually put it forward that likely in the next 5 years, we might not necessarily be providing subsidies to the market the way we provide them now. Today, how we give them is that we go through the recyclers and we pay for the material to be collected. But I think as we move along in this process, we are going to find, and for PackPro, we've adopted a model known as BizNataka, where we are trying to establish as many agents as possible throughout the country, where we are supporting them to develop businesses around the recovery, collection, and trading of the materials that they are collecting by providing linkages to the markets. But beyond that, when you think about it more critically, is how much money are they getting for the items they're collecting? In some jurisdictions like South Africa, we have seen that there's a base fee for collection that is being levied. Is that the direction Kenya will take? We don't know. And so we hope that at some point, these are conversations that we will begin to have once we begin to fully implement EPR. And then, of course, to the question that Gupi has asked, when will EPR be implemented? I think as Dr. Macharia stated, there's a court process. There's litigation that is underway around the regulations that were supposed to go live May 5th. And I think the contentious clauses were really around the import fee that Dr. Macharia spoke to, which is 150 shillings. And really it's because manufacturers are looking at it from the perspective that we are already paying an EPR fee, okay, to these PROs, such as myself and James and the others that are there. And then we have this parallel 150 shillings per item that is being levied by the government. The reality is it's very difficult for a company to make those two payments at the same time. And typically what will happen if the process were to go underway as is because of the exorbitant rate that is in the regulation, you'll find more companies aligned to paying the government first, okay? As opposed to paying organizations such as ours, because that is direct compliance. Then we begin to see EPR being watered down in the country. And so I think from where I sit and maybe other PROs, our hope is that we can get to some sort of middle ground around that fee. I do appreciate there is residual waste that comes from all packaging material, regardless of how recyclable it is, that needs to be managed. And of course, that there's a demand on government by us as the citizens on managing waste, okay? And within a lot of the county governments, you'll find that waste is not a highly prioritized activity, which means it doesn't get the requisite budgetary allocation that it requires. I think a very good example, and maybe in closing, Mark, is I think last week, the governor of Nairobi, he put some new bins in the city and they were vandalized, okay? They were taken out, they were stolen, and this is a problem even as PROs we face. And so what he has had to do is to bring in some bins from a company in the UK that are anti-theft, so that he tries to provide that infrastructure to people so that they can be able to dispose the waste. But when you look at the cost, it's very high. So he might be able to afford it because he's in Nairobi. It's the capital city, his revenues are high. But what about smaller counties that are struggling with their own source revenues? Okay. And so when you look at it that way, we still have counties that don't have designated dump sites, you know. A lot of them are burning. If I take you to Mandera, you'll find a lot of the waste is being burnt there, and it is recyclable. And so from that perspective, I understand the demand on NEMA for waste management and trying to finance that. But I think it's how do we get this to a level that is fair for manufacturers and that allows EPR to grow in the direction that it's able to be catalytic in driving a circular economy.
Response in terms of the outlook from sustainability and also the response to Guppy there with the quote issue and pushback that is active at the moment. And so that gives us at least an understanding of what we're operating in. To you, Raj, you've spoken a lot mostly on the challenges as an alternative energy solution provider. From ISO perspective as MD, what would your word be to the regulators as well as the impact investors who are listening, someone listening here and could be in your purview? What's your call to them?
Mark, in our experience, when we've gone out to look for funding, projects are assessed on three very major areas: supply chain, technology, and market. Now, there are two factors here which I would ask the regulators to assist with any project that is coming up for funding. Supply chain. As I mentioned to you earlier, Mark, the supply chain in this country is still very informal. And in addition to us running our business of recycling, we at the moment are having to go back into trying to obtain a sustainable and quantifiable supply chain. And with due respect, Joyce of Pack Pro has assisted us in the recent past in trying to get our supply chain more reliable. And then we come to the question of the market. And there again, the regulators can assist by either giving incentives to manufacturers to increase the content of recycled plastic, or, as I said earlier, in our particular case as alternative energy, if the regulators were more keenly looking at air emissions, it would boost the demand for our product. So those are the areas that I think regulators would be able to assist. In terms of investment, I firmly believe that as alternative energy systems, we tick a lot of boxes from an environmental point of view. And we have now created a business model which is sustainable. So it's an area where investment would give them a decent return on investment, but we cannot work on the same terms as commercial banks. So as Ikrit mentioned earlier, we as recyclers would need a little bit of green funding to assist us in that area.
And quite candid in your reality kind of picture that you present. It's not easy, you say, but you're still giving the solution, and we hope moving forward in terms of making this work, all the stakeholders and the players will be able to collaborate. And in that spirit of collaboration, let me bring it to, allow me to call you Ambassador Mary, because you're the touch point with community-based the community in many areas in the country. And I can tell how you're collaborating, at least with the panelists here, because there's a lot of mention with your work. And I can tell you work together in many ways, not at cost purposes, but to support each other. So you could tell us how Takataka Ni Mali has been working or is looking to collaborate with local and even global actors to scale up community-based circular economy moving forward.
So thank you. One of the SDG, I think the SDG 17 talks about partnership for growth.
Yeah.
In our model, we believe that the only way we are going to unlock the full potential in the waste management sector is through collaboration. And I say this because I'm in manufacturing. I understand the processes of from collection to recycling to converting plastic waste. And that one cannot be done by one person. The same, you look at other different waste streams. We have paper, we have electronic waste, we have hazardous waste, and there's value across all those different waste streams. So today we have talked about the plastics waste stream, but think about all the other. Then you can see how much value there is. It then means that the infrastructure, we've talked about that, is underdeveloped for Kenya, for East Africa, and for Africa. There are other areas that infrastructure is more developed. So how can we learn from them? And then also there are different technologies for processing, for treating waste, for collecting that we can look into. How do we learn from those who have maybe similarity into our geographical, how we are decentralized? How do we come up with technology that can be able to give the same result, affordable technologies, and can also be able to, we can leverage on how we are decentralized. We have different counties, we want to manage our waste at different counties. So sometimes it's impossible that we nationalize some of these operations. So what we've done as Takataka Ni Mali is to look at the different stakeholders within the whole, that ecosystem. So we work with NEMA, we work with the ministry, we work with the PROs, and I will give an example like what Joyce has talked about, the Bisnataka model. We are working together with the Bisnataka model, looking into how it is that we really can be able to develop the infrastructure for the informal sector from collection to how it is that we can formalize them. How can we really be able to get their data so that we can be able to unlock for them finances? We are talking about the green finances. When you meet with the people who have money, including KIFFWA and KCV, they will say that there are no investable projects. How can we be able to come up with different models and support these small organizations so that they're investable? And they're investable at different scale. There are those who need little money, there are those who need a lot of money. So how do you make sure that those who want hundreds of thousands and millions, they can be able to get the money and unlock the technology that would support them to increase productivity and develop efficiency with them? Then we have partnered, and Joyce has talked about ISWA. ISWA is the International Solid Waste Association. It's an international association that really guides on the technologies and the best global practices around the waste management. And what we are doing with them is to see how it is that we can bring the global practices for Africa. I'm currently sitting in the Board of Africa chapter. So we are organizing the the waste management ecosystems in Africa. Then we have divided that into regional blocks. Then we have created what we are calling the East Africa Waste Management Coalition, so that then we bring it to East Africa, and then we bring it down into Kenya. So across East Africa, then we are creating what we are calling the national chapters. So in Kenya now, we want to develop what we are calling the Kenya National Chapter. What this collaboration and association does is that then we are able to join the international working groups to be able to learn or get the technologies of what is happening globally. Then we can be able to localize the learnings that we get across from that. We also have created what we call an Africa Waste is Wealth conference, a summit where we bring together all the stakeholders. And this is where we look into how do you have conversations around trade, around the economic value of waste and the policy. How do we maybe come up with policy opinions that unlock the actual economic value within the waste management value chain, even as we regulate in our behaviors or how we take care of the environment? How do we marry that so that there's economic value around that? So we have a conference that we call the Africa Waste is Wealth, which we run annually, and all the members here have been part of our conference. Then from the collection, the regulator, and the recyclers. How do we create value in terms of money for the people who are collecting waste? This is where we are saying that they get paid enough, but then also how do you create value for the brands or the organizations or for the manufacturers who are collecting that? So we have another digital platform that we call EcoLoop. And what we are doing with that EcoLoop platform is to pick now the waste management data and convert that for sustainability reporting, ESG reporting. So your waste becomes a component for your environment reporting for ESG, and then you're able to unlock some of these monies that we are talking about, the sustainable, the green financing. Then earlier on, you had Abdul talk about access to market, because he talked about a regulation that has been introduced by the EU, which then means that you need maybe to add some component of recyclable products that, and beyond that, they also need to really trace in your activities how it is that you're interacting with the environment. So that also traceability of the activity help to unlock market. So there's the compliance in terms of regulatory compliance, but there's also access to finance and access to market. So bringing that value from the activity in the waste management to the organizations and the brand owners, I think those are some of the activities that we are doing. So how do we bring all the stakeholders together? How do we create value for each stakeholder within the ecosystem? I think that is what we have been doing. So we partner with the BMOs, the business organizations. We partners with the waste collectors. Actually, to formalize the waste collectors, we form them into CBOs, community-based organizations. We work with the county government so that we can create a path to formalize them so that then they can be able to scale. We partner with the regulators, we partner with the PROs, and we partner now with the international global practices so that we can be able to transfer knowledge. I think those are some of the things that we are doing, and I will leave it at that.
You're being modest by saying some of the things. That's a lot that you do. And I think I'm correct by calling you Ambassador Mary with all the hats that you wear in your role. So asante sana for that. And to you, Ikrit, and I know and I can tell you work a lot with Mary and others within the panel. There's something you're shifting to in terms of way of doing things. And feel free to just explain a bit further in layman with the few minutes that we have remaining, the food grade resin for packaging and how you will ensure that the closed loop recycling system is still going to be central in your operations. And in that response, talk about the opportunities that you see within the circular economy solutions for packaging moving forward.
Fantastic. Thanks, Mark. Great question. And I think in today's call, we've mentioned many times about PET, rPET, circular economy. So let me start with breaking down that for a start. So PET is basically the polyethylene terephthalate, which is the polymer that is used to make our water bottles, soda bottles, jam, peanut butter packaging, Omo, etc. Cosmetics as well, like Madam Mary uses them. It is the safest plastic to use. That's why it's desirable. So basically, what currently happens is we have a very linear economy. So imagine like one line from start to end, where a bottle is produced, it's put on a shelf, a consumer buys it, they consume it, and it's either chucked out of the window or put into a bin or landfill. And it ends up there for about 500 years before it doesn't degrade, it disintegrates. So it becomes small, tiny microplastics, which remain there forever. Basically, our 10th generation can also see that plastic then. So basically, how we want to change that conversation is the bottles we have for soda and water, they get thrown away. We collect them, clean them, sort them, and then process them into flakes, PET flakes. So we wash them thoroughly. Now, basically, the PET bottle is very clean from the outside. It is not yet food grade. So it can go into further food processing, or it can go into textile, carpets, etc. Or PET strapping as well. Commonly, you'll see a carton sealed with a strap, like a green color strap. That's PET. So this is commonly what is currently happening. So for T3, we want to take that step further, right? Take the plastic into food grade. So it's further melted, you increase the quality. And now you're looking at rPET resin. It's cleaned so thoroughly, so the plastic is now safe enough to use for food packaging once again. So we set up systems to ensure traceability and compliance with KEBs, bottlers, and brand owners. They have their own standards to make sure that what we have produced at T3 is food safe again. So safe enough to go from Dandora back into a KIFFWA or a Naibos, on a shelf again. It is our responsibility to make sure that we add in those steps in between to make sure what comes from the dump site is safe for people to consume again. So when we get one bottle, recycle it to make the resin to be made into a new bottle, and that into new bottles again and again, that is what we term as a circular economy. So basically now the bottle has been produced, goes onto a shelf, gets consumed, gets disposed, recycled again and again. That same bottle can be going back and back into the same economy. So in terms of scaling up, right, as Ambassador Mary mentioned, it can't happen with one company or one stakeholder working on their own. It's multi-pronged with multi-stakeholder engagement, and takes collaboration of PROs, standardization bodies, recyclers, brand owners, and governing bodies, KAM, KEFFWA, etc. So that we can work and collaborate all the way from when a bottle is produced, how is it produced, is it even recyclable, to how is it collected, can we subsidize the collection, can we make this material more attractive for waste pickers to pick up. Then it gets sent to the recycling facilities, ensure it's recycled very sustainably, and then brand owners need to come in with their own targets and standardization bodies to make sure that what we are selling is now food grade, and then brand owners to come and offtake this from the recyclers. That is one way where we can work hand in hand, everybody together, and make sure that sustainability is embedded across the packaging value chain. So in terms of scaling up, by next year or 2026, we're looking to have direct supply agreements with beverage and food companies, so that not only in Kenya, but all across East Africa, so that we can replace the currently imported resin, what we're currently importing from Asia mainly, with locally sourced, traceable, food-grade rPET resin. So it can support our economic development, and as well as support the sort of emission goals and the ESG goals that the companies currently have to reduce their carbon emissions. So the potential is huge. I think it begins with building credibility and transparency in every bottle that we produce, purchase, recycle, and so on and so forth. I hope, Mark, that has answered your question. Sorry, you're on mute, Mark.
Yes, apologies. I'm getting excited. I was saying, yes, you have responded and then some. And I'm wishing you the very best at P3. And as you mentioned, it takes collaboration. You are working with, an ecosystem here. And then you need to be able to work together to realize the different innovations that you're going to bring into this particular space of the circular economy and scaling it up. Like, it won't be an individual effort only, but it will take working together. So thank you for that response, Ikrit. And we have questions that have been posted in the chat section because we're at 12:13. This is when we're meant to conclude and be done with even the Q&A section. However, if there is a burning response or burning question from our contributors here, there are those who've joined us. Some people are courageous enough to ask questions directly or even just write it down. If you've seen that the question or an issue hasn't been addressed that you were hoping to, please, this is your opportunity. You could raise your hand. I can see it from my end in terms of your virtual hand. And before we call it a session, and any of our panelists can also respond to the questions. Dr. Kari, I think you're still with us. Excuse me, because I see there's a link you posted at 11:49. There are some questions, quite a number actually, directed at NEMA. If you see anyone that you'd want to respond to right now, because there were quite a number, and perhaps you're able to respond to them directly, I'm not too sure, as the panelists were contributing, but you could take some of the questions here, and perhaps just to get that going, Solomon Jombai says, ports of entry, including airports and border points, continue to pose a significant weakness in Kenya's efforts to combat plastic bags. Although NEMA was once very proactive in addressing this issue, its engagement has since diminished. What do you have to say for that?
Thank you. From the legal border points, we do monitor, and we get very rarely do we get any plastic coming from there. So these plastics come from illegal points, which they do not pass through the legal border points, because we work closely with the police and with other agencies at the border. Those of you who have even traveled using our airlines, even foreign airlines, they warn that in Kenya plastic is banned, and they always advise the travelers that they leave the plastic bags in the plane. And so we cannot say that the plastic passed through our legal border points. So let's talk of the illegal ones. And all of you also agree that once the paper is inside Kenya, the demand is still high, because the benefits that we were getting from plastics are still there. And so definitely they'll get buyers. And since these selling points are dispersed, we have not managed to get everywhere. And as I said, we have had challenges with the office of the ODPP, because the office demands that we charge the suppliers and not the mama bogas. And so that is where the challenge has been. And we are doing now what we call the intelligence approach in enforcement, where we work closely with the DCI to help to give us information about who are these suppliers, so that we can get the big fish and not the small fish. So that is where we are about our borders. Thank you. Please unmute.
You can put on your camera so that we can see you, so that people don't think you're a bot. It was a while since you last gave us your keynote address. Thank you to James, who's responded to Mwiga's question earlier. Just perhaps as a last one, if there's no burning concluding remark from our panel, there's something that Mbinya Mutiso said earlier, Dr. Tari, At the household level, most don't segregate waste, which of course adds to the cost of operations. For a directive to segregate waste by installing the different bins for organic and inorganic waste, these bins are very expensive. What is NEMA doing to incentivize proper and efficient waste disposal and management? How can this be enforced at the county level, especially in urban and residential settings at the county level? Mbinya Mutiso asks.
Of course, NEMA is trying to encourage a whole system approach. You know, waste is an evolved function, and NEMA may not be able to reach every lower point at the county level to do enforcement. And so what we are doing is we are reminding counties every now and then that it is your responsibility to ensure that waste is segregated at source and it is transported properly. So we keep reminding counties, and especially the issue of reorganization of dump sites, so that the dump site can be able to receive the green bag separately, to receive the black bag and the blue bag separately. So that has been our effort number one. Actually, we wrote to counties on 19th of December last year, 2024, reminding them about the color code, that we have the national color code. And then, since we don't want a disruption, we will continue using the existing dump sites, which are illegal anyway, but they are designated. We will continue using those dump sites, but in another way, in a different way, in a circular approach, so that we don't have mixing of green, black, and blue bags. And the same case goes for transportation. We are doing the same, that there should be no mixing. So, you know, NEMA's, there are some points where we have direct influence, where we can quickly enforce, and that is at the transportation level. Every waste transporter in Kenya is licensed by NEMA. And so our point of entry, which we are starting because we have finished awareness now, we want to start enforcing using the waste transporters. And we have already held a meeting with them to tell them that we will start enforcing the waste segregation at source, so that when they are transporting waste, they should not transport mixed waste. If they do, then there is a fine for them in the law, where they are fined 50,000. So that one is now clear in the law, and so we are soon going out to do that enforcement, to make sure that there is a segregation at source. But we are also working with the counties to make sure that we also change those dump sites so that they are able to receive the waste at different locations. Reason being that when you do segregate waste and you put it separately, then you can be able to recover. At the end of the day, it's about, have you been able to recover more? That's our measure of success in this transition to circular economy. We want to recover more. And so that is the approach that we are taking. And in the next few weeks, you will hear more of enforcement for the transporters. It will be every one of you in this meeting. You hear your waste transporter telling you that segregate your waste, or I will not take it, because of the enforcement that we will be doing on the roads for our trucks. Because we have influence over them, we can even cancel their licenses. You see, taking them to court is one way, but canceling a license is also another approach which we can use to ensure compliance. Thank you.
Asante, Dr. Ayub, for that response, and there's plenty more. Frederick Netzer and Mwiga had another question, but we appreciate, because of time, we were to conclude this at 12:30. So we will close it at this point, and also having checked with our panel on whether they have any concluding remarks or any burning points, and they all feel that they have spoken and covered the ground that they had sought to. So I'd like to appreciate you, Dr. Ayub Macharia and Daruga, for standing in and representing NEMA, Director Environmental Enforcement. Thank you, Rajesh Kent, Managing Director, Alternative Energy Systems Limited, that is ISO. Meringechu, founder, Takataka ni Mali Foundation. Ikrit Kent, the Chief Operations Officer, T3 EPZ Limited. Joyce Gashoge, the CEO, Packaging Producer Responsibility Organization, PACPRO. And your counterpart, James Odongo, CEO, Kenya Extended Producer Responsibility Organization, KEFFWA, for this conversation and webinar, enlightening, and also for the contributions that have been sent in earlier on the chat section, and your company for those who have tuned in and followed this conversation on plastic as an asset, unlocking market value in circular economy, and hope that you feel that the objectives have been met. That is to reframe plastic waste as an economic asset and highlight the economic potential of plastic waste. I did, rebrand Mary as ambassador, but I believe we all are ambassadors, because even in our own way, we are consumers. And James did say that the consumers are the primary audience in this effort. And so go the forth and be great ambassadors, and wishing you all the best in your specific areas of operation. And asanteni sana to the Kenya Climate Ventures and KIFFWA for being the co-conveners of this conversation that we've had this morning and into afternoon. So asanteni nyote, you can get to say kwaheri and a good afternoon. Enjoy lunch if that's what you're breaking for.